On my graduation day, my dad showed up with his new family, called me his friend's daughter, let his stepdaughter call me the help, then said it's easier this way. So I slipped him the DNA test that proved I was never his to begin with. I was standing in the middle of the football field at my high school in Fort Collins, Colorado, sweat sticking my gown to my back, when I heard someone behind me say, "Hey, could you grab us some water? The sun's killing us." I turned around. It was my dad, except he wasn't looking at me like his daughter. He wasn't even introducing me like one. He had his arm wrapped around his shiny new wife, some Pilates-toned woman I'd only ever seen tagged in his Facebook posts, and his stepdaughter, a blonde 13-year-old who was already giving me the same look girls like her gave grocery store clerks who bagged too slow. My dad glanced at me like I was a stranger he vaguely recognized from somewhere boring. Then he said it. "This is my friend's daughter. She goes to school here. Real sweet kid." I swear the field went silent. Maybe it didn't. Maybe my ears just shut down for a second. His stepdaughter wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, I thought she was like the help or something. The gown looked like an apron." And my dad didn't correct her, didn't laugh, didn't even flinch. He just shrugged and said, "It's easier this way." Easier for who? I had no idea. All I knew was that the man who spent years telling me to work harder, be grateful, and remember who pays for things couldn't even say I was his on the one day every parent dreams about. My mom had died when I was 14. She was the one who raised me. Dad just showed up every other weekend, usually annoyed, usually in a rush, usually tapping his fingers like being around me was something he was late for. After she was gone, he stepped in more, but only in the bare minimum way. Bills, rides, the occasional holiday dinner where he spent half the time scrolling his phone. Still, I tried. I tried so hard to keep the peace, to act like we were building something again. Now there he was, treating me like a household employee. I didn't say anything, not at first. I felt this weird calm take over me, the kind that feels like the air right before a tornado forms. Because I'd known something for a month. Something he didn't. Something I found by accident. Something that made the word, Dad, feel like a costume he put on out of convenience. And it was sitting in the side pocket of my bag, folded exactly 3 times, tucked in a plain white envelope. A DNA test, not some cheap online thing either. A full, medical-grade paternity panel I'd run behind his back using old paperwork and the swab kit I'd found in a junk drawer at his place. I'd mailed it myself, and I hadn't told a single person. I stared at him as he rattled off some excuse to his wife about how he doesn't really know this girl, and she's just being nice. His wife didn't question a thing. She just smiled at me the way rich people smile at hotel staff. Polite, distant, dismissive, something in me snapped. I stepped forward, reached into my bag, and pulled out the envelope. My hands weren't even shaking. "Actually," I said, loud enough that his wife and stepdaughter looked over, "I wanted to give you this." He blinked. "What's this?" But I didn't answer. I just handed it to him. The envelope felt heavier than paper should feel. Inside it was the truth. A truth that was about to blow up everything he thought he controlled. He slipped a finger under the flap. And right as he opened it, I said, "Before you read that, maybe ask yourself why it was so easy for you to pretend I'm not yours." He froze. His wife frowned. His stepdaughter squinted. My heart thumped so hard I felt it in my throat. He pulled the paper out. And the exact second his eyes hit the results, I watched the color drain from his face. People always assume the real hurt starts with the big moment, the humiliation, the slap-in-the-face comment, the breaking point. But honestly, the moment my dad called me, his friend's daughter, wasn't the first crack. It was just the one loud enough for everyone else to hear. The real damage started way earlier, back when I was a kid growing up on the south side of Fort Collins, in a small condo that always smelled like my mom's lemon cleaner. She worked 2 jobs and somehow still managed to make our home feel safe. She used to tell me, some people parent with love, some parent with guilt, and some parent because they're supposed to. Guess which one your dad is? But she never said it in a mean way. More like she'd already made peace with it, and she didn't want me expecting more from him than he had to give. Dad would show up for weekend visits like he was checking a box. He wasn't abusive or cruel, just absent. Even when his body was in the room, his attention wasn't. He'd nod while scrolling his phone, ask me how school was but clearly didn't want details, buy me random cheap gifts that felt like apologies for something he hadn't bothered to name. After he remarried when I was 12, the excuses got more frequent. We're busy. We have plans. We're traveling. He'd drop me from one weekend a month to one every couple months, and then to let's just play it by ear. I didn't hate him for it. I just made myself smaller, quieter, easier. I told myself that if I didn't ask for much, he'd stick around. And sometimes he did. He came to my 8th grade choir concert. He helped me buy my first laptop. He showed up when my mom was in the hospital near the end, standing in the doorway like he didn't know where to put his hands. After she died, he tried, at least at first. He checked on me more. He handled the funeral costs. He made sure the fridge wasn't empty. But everything he did felt more like an obligation than a choice. I wasn't his daughter. I was a responsibility with a heartbeat. Maybe that's why the DNA test didn't destroy me the way it should have. It started with faded paperwork I found in a blue file box my mom kept under her bed. Medical forms from when I was a baby, her emergency contact info, some custody filings between her and my dad, except one page wasn't a custody form. It was an old lab order. A paternity test request from when I was 6 months old. The signature at the bottom didn't look like my dad's, and someone had written, never submitted in my mom's handwriting. I don't know what made me search for an actual test after that. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was self-defense, maybe, deep down, I already knew what I'd find. I found an old DNA swab kit in his bathroom drawer during one of the rare weekends I spent at his house. No idea if it was his, but the label said it was unused. Maybe they'd ordered it once and chickened out. Maybe he'd forgotten about it, but it was there, unopened, practically offering itself to me. I swabbed my cheek. I took an old toothbrush of his, I mailed it all out. And I told myself that whatever the results said, at least I'd have an answer. When the results came in, I sat on my bed staring at the email until the words blurred. Probability of paternity, 0%. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even tell my best friend. I just stared at my ceiling for a long time and felt something settle in my chest, something like acceptance, something like anger, something like clarity, because now I understood everything. The distance, the obligation. The way his new family always came first, the barely there affection, the constant sense that he was waiting for me to fade out of his life, but he didn't get to fade me out today, not on my graduation. Not after he pretended I didn't exist. And the worst part, he didn't even know the full story yet. He only saw the test. He still didn't know what my mom told me the night before she died. After he opened the envelope on the field, after I watched the shock crawl up his neck like a rash, I walked away. Not fast, not dramatically, just calmly, like I'd finally put down something heavy I'd been forced to carry. I didn't even stay for the rest of the ceremony. I didn't want to sit in the bleachers pretending everything was fine, while his new wife gave me confused, judgmental looks, and his stepdaughter kept whispering things like I was invisible. I went out to the parking lot, found a patch of shade near the gym wall, and sat on the curb. My phone buzzed nonstop, 4 missed calls from him, 1 text from his wife. "Hi, this is Cheryl, can we talk?" And 1 unknown number that had to be his stepdaughter's phone because the message just said, "You ruined my grad pics loser." I actually laughed at that one. A short, empty laugh, but still. The sun was blinding, the asphalt smelled like burning rubber, and the whole time I sat there, I kept thinking, he still doesn't know everything. Because the night my mom died, she said something that didn't make sense until the test results came in. She was hooked up to tubes, drifting in and out of sleep, and I was holding her hand. She squeezed my fingers weakly and whispered, "You're enough. Don't let him make you think you owe him anything. He wasn't there when you were born." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally, like he wasn't present in a metaphorical way. I had no idea she meant it literally. I replayed that moment 100 times as I sat on the curb. A security guard came over at one point, asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. He left me alone. Then I saw my dad coming across the parking lot. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His shirt was wrinkled, his face was red, not angry red, but stunned red. His steps were uneven, like he didn't trust the ground anymore. He didn't yell, he didn't demand anything. He just stopped a few feet away and said, "Where did you get that?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him, waiting. He tried again. "Who put you up to this?" That question hit harder than the first. The idea that I couldn't possibly move against him unless someone manipulated me, classic him. "Nobody," I said. "I found the paperwork Mom saved." "The old test you two never sent in." That made him blink, hard. "What paperwork?" "The one from when I was a baby." He opened his mouth, closed it, then rubbed his face like he was trying to wake himself up. Behind him, his wife was hovering at the edge of the lot, looking torn between approaching and fleeing. His stepdaughter was sitting on the hood of their SUV, completely unbothered. Chewing gum like this was peak entertainment. He took a slow breath. "Why would you do this on your graduation day?" That line, wow, as if I had ambushed him with the truth for fun. "Why would you call me someone else's daughter?" I shot back. "Why would you let her call me the help?" He winced but didn't deny it. "You humiliated me," he said quietly, and that was when the anger finally broke through the numbness. "You humiliated yourself," I said. "I just stopped covering for you." He stepped closer, voice firming. "This doesn't change anything. Biology doesn't erase 18 years. I raised you." I laughed, louder this time. "You visited me." "There's a difference." His wife finally approached, touching his arm like she needed to remind him she existed. "We should talk about this privately," she said, but he wasn't leaving, and neither was I. He stared at me with this odd, searching expression, like he was trying to find the version of me who always stayed quiet, always swallowed my feelings. But that girl wasn't here anymore. And then, just when I thought the conversation couldn't get worse, he said something that made everything tilt sideways. Something I wasn't prepared for. Something that made me realize the DNA test was only the beginning. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his whole face changed. No more shock, no more embarrassment. Just this tight, resigned expression I'd only ever seen once before. The day he told me he couldn't afford to split Christmas between two households because it's just easier if you stay with your mom. He exhaled sharply, like he'd finally reached the point he'd been avoiding for years. "All right," he said. "Fine, you want the truth, you're not mine. I've known that since you were 6 months old." The words hit me like cold water dumped over my head. Even though I'd already seen the DNA test, hearing him admit it so bluntly felt like someone taking a sledgehammer to my chest. "You knew," I repeated, because my brain couldn't catch up. He nodded once, jaw tightening. "Your mom told me after you were born. She wasn't sure who your father was. She said she'd handle everything, and I agreed because I didn't want to drag a baby through a custody fight that wasn't even mine." His wife gasped softly behind him. His stepdaughter stopped chewing. I stared at him, trying to process it. "You mean all these years, every awkward visit, every guilt trip, every time you acted like being around me was some kind of burden, you knew I wasn't yours and never said anything?" "It wasn't my place," he snapped, defensive now. "And your mom begged me not to. She said it would confuse you. She promised she'd tell you when you were older." My stomach twisted. "She never told me." "Well," he said, shrugging slightly, "that's not my fault." There it was, the real him. The man who spent years pretending obligation was love. The man who could rewrite history in a heartbeat if it made him look better. But he wasn't done. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "And just so you don't twist this into something it's not, your mom wanted me to sign over rights when you were 5. She said it'd make everything simpler. I didn't do it because I didn't want people thinking I walked out on my kid." I felt everything inside me freeze solid. "So I'm what?" I said slowly. "A reputation shield, a way to make you look like a decent dad." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was the answer. His wife's eyes were wide now, not at me but at him. "Mark, you never told me any of this." He ignored her, focused only on me. "Look, I did my best with a situation I didn't ask for. I paid support. I showed up. I did more than a lot of men would have." I felt like I might actually throw up. "You did the bare minimum and called it noble." He frowned. "You're being dramatic." No, I said, voice shaking now not from fear but from rage finally finding its legs. You lied to me my whole life. You let me believe you didn't care because of something wrong with me, not because you were never supposed to be my father in the first place. His jaw tightened again. I stayed, he said, like that was some kind of medal he deserved. And then he said the line that snapped something clean in me. You should be grateful I didn't walk away. Grateful. For crumbs, for scraps, for being tolerated. Behind him, his wife whispered, Mark, stop, but he didn't even hear her. He kept going. You think this changes anything? It doesn't. I'm done with drama. You graduated. You're an adult. You can move on with your life and I'll move on with mine. We don't need to drag this out. There it was, the dismissal. The final shove. Like I was a loose end he could finally tie off and forget about. But he still didn't know the whole truth. He still didn't know what my mom told me on her last conscious night. And he had no idea that this, his confession, his cruelty, only made what I was planning much easier. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at him, this man who'd spent 18 years holding himself like some reluctant hero, and I realized he expected me to walk away quietly. To accept everything he'd said, swallow it, and disappear from his life now that I wasn't his responsibility. He wanted closure without accountability, but he wasn't getting that. Not after what my mom told me. Not after everything he just admitted out loud. And definitely not after the way he'd treated me on the field, like I was some stranger interrupting his perfect family portrait. He started to turn back toward his wife, already done with the conversation, already mentally wiping his hands of me. That alone made my blood boil. I stood up from the curb. Actually, I said, we're nowhere near done. He turned, annoyed. He always got annoyed when I didn't shrink. What now? He asked. You said Mom asked you to sign away rights when I was 5, I said. Why? He scoffed like it was stupid. Because she thought the truth would confuse you. She said she'd handle finding your real father someday. She didn't want me in the middle. That wasn't the truth. Or at least, not the truth my mom told me. The night before she died, she was drifting, eyes half open, voice thin. She squeezed my hand and whispered, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from him. I'd asked her what she meant, but she'd already fallen asleep again. The nurse said her mind was wandering. But after everything today, I knew my mom had been clear-headed in that moment. She meant every word. And now I knew what she was apologizing for, because I'd found something else in her file box. Something she'd kept hidden from both of us. Something I hadn't planned to use, not until he acted like today was the day he could finally wash his hands of me. Now it was going to be the centerpiece of my revenge. I adjusted the strap of my gown. You knew I wasn't yours, I said. You stayed involved just enough to keep people from judging you, but you also refused to sign away rights because you wanted control. You wanted the story to make you look good. He stiffened. His wife looked at him sharply. I didn't, he started, but I cut him off. Don't bother, you admitting you've known since I was 6 months old is all I need. All you need for what? He asked slowly. I didn't smile. But something inside me did. For something Mom left behind for me. He frowned. What are you talking about? I looked him dead in the eye. She didn't just save the paternity paperwork, Dad. She saved everything. He stared like he didn't understand, but he did. I could see it. A flicker of dread. A flicker of something he hadn't felt toward me in years, fear. His wife stepped closer. Mark, what did you do? He didn't answer her. He just watched me, waiting. I took out my phone, opened the folder I'd been keeping locked for a month, and held it up so only he could see the names. The documents. The dates. The emails, the messages between him and my mom from before I was even born. His face went white, because he recognized them. Where did you get those? He whispered. You left a lot more in that house than you thought, I said. Mom didn't throw away anything, especially not things that proved why she didn't trust you. His wife's voice cracked. Mark, what is that? But he didn't speak. He just swallowed hard, eyes locked on the screen like it was a loaded weapon. I lowered the phone. You want to tell them, I said, or should I? Behind him, his stepdaughter had stopped pretending not to listen. The SUV's door was half open and she was frozen. He shook his head slightly. Not here. Then when? I shot back. Because you were awfully quick to declare you're done with me. His jaw worked. His hand was shaking. I knew then that my timing was perfect. He tried to erase me today. Now I was going to expose the one thing he'd spent almost 2 decades burying, and I hadn't even shown him the worst part yet. For a long moment, nobody moved. Not his wife. Not his stepdaughter. Not him. Just the three of them staring at me like I'd cracked open a door they didn't know existed. He finally spoke, voice low and rough. You don't know what you're holding, you don't know the context. Funny, I said, that's exactly what guilty people say. His wife stepped forward and held out her hand. Show me, she said softly. But I didn't, not yet, because this part wasn't for her, it was for him. I slid my phone back into my pocket and said, before I show anyone anything, I want to hear you say it, out loud. He shook his head. No, then I guess I'll explain it myself, I said, turning slightly toward his wife. He stiffened instantly. Don't. His reaction alone was confirmation. But before I could speak, he stepped between us, grabbed my arm gently but firmly and said under his breath, not here. Not in front of them. I yanked my arm back. Why, you weren't worried about in front of them when you called me your friend's daughter. His wife looked like she was about to faint. Mark, what is going on? He didn't answer her. He looked at me with this pleading, desperate expression I had never seen on him before. Like I was holding the match and he was drenched in gasoline. Please, he whispered. Not like this. Something in me paused, not out of sympathy, but because I needed to understand why he was suddenly terrified. What did you do? I asked. He closed his eyes, his shoulders slumped, and that's when he finally broke. It wasn't just the paternity, he said. There's more. His wife clutched her chest like she'd been punched. Mark, but he kept talking, voice shaking now. Your mom didn't want me signing over rights because she was afraid of the court digging into everything. She didn't want them going through our old messages. She didn't want questions about the timeline. What timeline? His wife demanded. He opened his mouth to answer, and that's when his stepdaughter, who had been watching the entire thing like a reality show, chimed in. Dad, she said, did you cheat on Mom? That question hit him so hard he physically flinched. His wife stared at him, horror spreading across her face. Is that what this is? Is that why you've been weird all morning? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. And then it hit me fast, cold, and sharp. The twist wasn't that he wasn't my biological father. It was that he might have cheated on his first wife with my mom, years before I was even born. Years that overlapped exactly with the emails and messages I had in that folder. His wife's voice cracked. Mark, did you have an affair? He turned to her, eyes wide, mouth open, but nothing came out, which was enough. She staggered back a step. Oh my God! I didn't expect what happened next. She turned on me, eyes wet and angry. You knew. You came here to humiliate us. I felt my stomach flip. No, I came here to give him the truth he's been hiding. I'm not the one who cheated. I didn't cheat, he snapped suddenly, finally breaking his silence. It wasn't like that. Then explain, she said. He rubbed his face, trembling. Your mom and I, we were separated, briefly. We didn't tell anyone, it was messy. It was short. It wasn't. Liar, his wife whispered. And the thing is, she wasn't wrong. Because the messages I found weren't from a brief separation. They stretched over years. And 2 months ago, 2 months before graduation, I found something else in that same box of my mom. A sealed letter she wrote for me, labeled, Open when he tries to walk away. I hadn't opened it yet. I'd been too scared. But now it was time. I reached into my gown pocket, pulled out the letter, and held it up. My dad went dead pale, because he recognized the handwriting, because he recognized the envelope, because the letter wasn't just addressed to me. It had his name on the back, too. I held the envelope between my fingers, the paper soft from years of being touched and moved and saved. His name was written on the back in my mom's handwriting, steady, sharp, unmistakable. The second his eyes landed on it, something in him collapsed. He whispered, She kept that? Yeah, I said. She kept everything you thought she threw away. His wife looked between us. What is that? I didn't answer, not yet. I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. My mom's handwriting covered the page in neat, tight lines. I took a breath and started to read. My voice shook at first, but the more I read, the steadier it became. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if Mark is standing there with you, then he's trying to leave. Again. His wife's hand flew to her mouth. He stared at the pavement like he was bracing for impact. I kept reading. I should have told you this sooner, but I didn't want you growing up carrying the weight of his choices. You were a child. You deserved to love the parents you had without knowing the truth of how you got here. My throat tightened, but I kept going. Mark didn't stay involved because he cared about you. He stayed because he was afraid. Afraid of what the truth would do to his reputation. Afraid of losing the image he built. Afraid of his first wife finding out what he did. His wife snapped her head toward him. Your first wife? He didn't look up. He didn't breathe. He didn't want a paternity test when you were born because he already knew he wasn't your father. But he also knew he'd been in my life long enough that people would start asking questions. My grip tightened on the page. He made me promise to keep quiet. He said if I told anyone about the affair, if I told anyone who your real father might be, he'd use every dollar he had to take you away from me. My lungs stopped working. The world didn't tilt, it dropped. His wife stumbled back like she'd been struck. Mark, you threatened her. He still didn't speak. He didn't deny it. He didn't even lift his head. He just stood there with that empty, hollow look. The look of someone who finally realized all their lies had an expiration date. I forced myself to read the rest. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you living in fear of him the way I did. He wasn't violent, just cruel. He cared more about being seen as a good man than actually being one. A tremor ran through me. My mom had always been gentle, kind, careful with her words. Seeing her write something so sharp it burned. So if he tries to walk away now, let him. He was never here out of love, only ego. I swallowed. You owe him nothing. I let the letter fall to my side. Silence, thick, heavy, brutal. His wife stared at him like she didn't recognize him, because she didn't. None of us did, not anymore. You threatened her, she said again, voice cracking. You threatened a single mother. You threatened to take her child because you didn't want to look like a bad guy. His jaw tightened. His eyes finally lifted, but there was no anger, just panic. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I demanded. Tell us. Tell your family why you've kept me around all these years. Tell them why you stayed just close enough to pretend you weren't the villain she wrote about. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then, quietly, dreadfully, he said, I couldn't let people know what I did, who I was with, when it would have ruined everything. My marriage, my job, my family, everything. His wife backed away like he was dangerous. His stepdaughter whispered, Dad, but he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at me, and in his eyes I saw it clearly. The only reason he ever stayed in my life was because he was terrified of losing his image. Not me, his reputation, his perfect man costume. That was the truth my mom had carried, the truth she died with, the truth he had spent 18 years burying. And now it was out, and I wasn't done. For a few seconds nobody spoke, not his wife, not his stepdaughter, not the man who had just admitted he stayed in my life out of fear, not love. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it safely into my gown pocket. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I felt steady, calm in a way I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. He took a step toward me. Listen, we can fix this. Let's go somewhere private. We don't need to drag my family into. Your family, I cut him off. You think they're the only ones who deserve the truth? His wife squared her shoulders. I do deserve the truth. And so does she. She jerked her chin toward her daughter, who was staring at the asphalt like it might swallow her. He shot her a look, half warning, half pleading, but she wasn't stepping back behind him this time. I took out my phone again and unlocked the folder. You said Mom wanted things simple, that she didn't want the courts involved, that she didn't want to confuse me. I held the screen up so he could see it again. But these messages say something different. He winced, hard, because he knew what was in there. I scrolled slowly, making sure he saw every date, every timestamp, every desperate message he'd sent my mom begging her not to expose the affair. The ones where he offered money, favors, promises. The ones where he lost his temper. The ones where he told her she needed him more than he needed her. I didn't show them to his wife. I didn't need to. His face showed enough. His wife's voice was a whisper. Mark, did you ever love me? He didn't answer, and that silence was the final nail. She wrapped her arms around herself, turned to me, and said quietly, do what you need to do. He snapped his head toward her. You can't be serious. You're just going to stand there and let her. She cut him off. I'm done protecting you. The look he gave her was full panic. The look he gave me was full rage. The kind of rage people feel when they realize the story they built around themselves is collapsing. You're going to ruin my life, he said. I kept my voice flat. No, you ruined your own life. I'm just done pretending with you. And then I told him the part he wasn't prepared for. You're right, I'm 18, an adult. I took a breath. Which means I'm legally allowed to petition the court for a retroactive child support audit. Not because I want your money, I don't. But because Mom deserved protection, not threats. His face twisted. You wouldn't dare. I already filed, I said. Last week, his wife gasped. His stepdaughter whispered, oh my God. He looked like the air was punched out of him. You don't understand what that will do to me. It'll pull your financials, I said. Your messages, your emails, everything you spent 18 years hiding. You can't. I can, I said. And I did. For the first time since I was 6 years old, I saw him afraid of me, really afraid. I turned to his wife. If you want copies of everything, I'll send them to you. You deserve to know who you married. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Please. His stepdaughter didn't say anything. She just looked at me like she finally understood I wasn't the help. I was the truth. I started walking toward my car. My gown brushed the asphalt. My tassel hit my shoulder with every step. And behind me I heard him call my name, not hey, not kid, not sweetheart. My name, but I didn't turn around. He'd spent 18 years choosing the version of me that was easiest for him. Now he finally had to deal with the real one. At my car door, I stopped, looked back once and said, you should have just been decent. It would have been easier that way. Then I left him standing in the parking lot with the life he built on lies falling apart around him. And for the first time in years, I felt free.